What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, very own publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for yet another edition of the UNC football show. Obviously, the Duke preview show with Carolina set to face the Blue Devils, their crosstown rival, at 4 p.m. on Saturday in Durham. That game will be on ESPN2. Duke currently a 2.5-point favorite. Over-under set at 55.5. So obviously bounce back performance is what the Carolina is going to be looking for against the Blue Devils. And yeah, man, we'll see what happens on Saturday. We'll talk about the Blue Devils a little bit later on in this one, but we've got some other housekeeping items we want to hit on first. Before that, and AJ, I want to go back to Monday real quick, because the topic, and we'll hit on, and after that, I want to hit on the podcast that we did, because we obviously did a podcast on kind of what happened in the locker room after the game. We also did a podcast on maybe the obstacles in reality that Carolina football is currently facing and has faced for a little while now. But I think it's appropriate to start on Monday because, AJ, the theme surrounding Carolina football right now, and the biggest talking point, really the only talking point, has been the fallout after the loss to JMU. I mean, that 70-50 loss still, I think, used the word off camera, it still has a heartbeat. That's the main thing that people are talking about. People aren't really talking about the Duke game, which you'd expect during a rivalry week. No, it's the fallout after that. And in order to understand and dissect that fallout a little bit more, you have to go back to Monday during the press conferences, because again, we've seen some different things this week. You talked to Mack, and I want to ask you about Mack Brown's press conference. You also talked to Jeff Collins and Chip Lindsey as well, but no player availability this week, no player availability after the JMU game either. No. So that is obviously a different thing than we've seen in the Mack Brown 2.0 era, which again is why we need to talk about it a little bit. So
it'll be what, 11 days? If we get players after the Duke game, it'll be 11 days since we talked to any players.
Yeah, and that's why I want, because I mean, I've listened to the press conferences, and I know a lot of fans listening to it have obviously listened to them as well. But as someone who was there, I want you to take us kind of inside the media room that day, because I think it's a very interesting situation. And I think Mack's press conference in particular was one unlike maybe we've seen in his 2.0 era. It was just different, and it's understandable when you look at all the things, surrounding Carolina and again, the fallout after the JMU game.
Yeah, 70-50 still does have a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. So no doubt. And because of what's come from it, mm-hmm. The play on the field, until people see something different, that's what's going to stick with people right now. And it'll stick for a while, but certainly until they take the field against Duke, that thing is going to boom, 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 boom. It's just going to stay like that. But in addition, the stuff about afterward, and we reported what we did, and we have many, many sources on that, and people hear different stuff. So I'm not going to say anything else is not accurate at all. I'm just going to say that all we know is what we've been told. That's why we reported as we did. So that created a new, almost like a new pulse. You know what I mean? The pulse of Mack. Mm-hmm. The pulse of Mack 2.0, and where is this going? And I think it's a fair conversation because it's all anybody's talking about. Then you go to Monday with the press conference, and it was not Mack's best press conference. And to be honest with you, I've always marveled at how good he is at dealing with the media, how good he is at handling tough questions, how good he is at hitting on all the positives of the players in his team. If a kid made a good play on special teams, it's going to come out. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like Dean Smith used to, some kid would go in and play 2 minutes instead of a really good screen, and Dean in the post-game press conference would note that screen that was made. There's an element of that with Mack, but it wasn't entirely there on Monday. He's a human being like the rest of us, and he was highly affected by what happened on the field, and then the fallout about what happened afterward. Mm-hmm. And that it got out, and that the program says that some things that went out were not true, and they've kind of fought that a little bit. Again, I only know what we reported. I'm not saying anything else isn't true at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we only know what we reported because there were two media outlets that basically were on this, and the other one is outstanding as we are. So it was enough that it got into the bloodstream of the fan base and people that aren't Carolina fans. And it's almost like that was a referendum on Mack. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have been very harsh and critical. I can understand where those emotions are coming from. It's kind of wild that it took this to draw emotion from Carolina football fans this season because they hadn't been showing up. Mm-hmm. You know, our traffic and our video views indicate that there hasn't been a great deal of interest, but this happens and everybody's coming out of the woodworks now, which is very, very interesting. But it's a good thing because I think anger can be passion. And I think that that's better than not. Yeah. You talk to people that cover SEC teams, some SEC teams, and they say the fan base is unreasonable, and that's great because they're unreasonable because they have such high expectations and they want to take part. And I think that's part of this story too, that you talk to all sides in this conversation throughout the campus, in various buildings on campus. And one of the things that they're all in agreement with is that they want the passion that the fans are showing since Saturday. They want that to be there all the time. And that's part of the problem, is because if that passion is 365, it's going to show up in donation. It's going to show up in NIL. It's going to show up as fannies in the seats, no matter who they're playing. So there's a lot of stuff. It's like, remember I said the other day, Richard Dreyfuss opened up the shark on Jaws and all this stuff poured out. And you've got, you know, the paint can, and you've got like a broom, and you've got soda cans and all these different things, and they all represent different aspects of the football program and the university culture and the fan base culture. And I think each has had a highlight in the last couple of days. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a healthy discussion that people have about North Carolina football, especially, and this is for the sake of discussion here, let's say Mack's tenure doesn't have a lot of time left. So the next guy that comes in is going to face all these things. And that was one of the reasons we discussed the obstacles in the podcast that we ran Monday, not because we're saying Mack's leaving, not because we're saying Mack should leave. It's like, hey, 95% of the people that we've heard from are saying it's got to make a change. Well, okay, but who are you going to get? And who are you going to get that's going to be able to navigate these things? There are some issues with North Carolina football as a whole that have been there for a long time and will stay there until there's a dramatic shift. I love the passion I've seen since Saturday just because it makes it more interesting. And I'm looking at this strictly from a journalistic standpoint. It's also picked up our traffic from a business standpoint. That's a positive thing too. I'm not going to deny that, but I like the story. And I think the story has been very, very interesting this week because the passionate reaction is part of the story, Jacob. So this whole thing has a heartbeat. Mack's comments afterward, and then the press conference Monday when he didn't want to talk about it. But we still, when I say we, us in the media, still got about 10 or 12 questions in. He ended up talking about it. It wasn't the same Mack on Monday that I've seen on all the previous Mondays in post-practice and the Zooms we've done on Wednesdays. And when I've talked to him off the record, you know, after the cameras are off, that kind of thing, this was a different Mack. This was a wounded Mack. And human nature is 1,000% always around, as you and I discuss all the time. And I feel for him. And I feel for him because his human nature reaction that he's working through is public.
Yeah.
He had to do the press conference. Yeah. So people are picking at the press conference. The man's working through this. And I feel for him to have to do that publicly. And no matter how much experience he hasn't had this sequence at North Carolina at this stage in year 6. So it's a new thing for him. And even legends have to take time sometimes to work through stuff. So it's a fascinating time. And we saw a very human Mack. And I imagine we're going to see more of that this year because I think that this story is going to hang around for a while. 70 to 50 itself is going to hang around. Mack afterward is going to hang around. Not talking to players is going to hang around. And then all these strong opinions that people have have put flags in the soil with are going to hang around too, because those who have said he needs to go, they're not going to backtrack just because they beat Duke. So, and the fan sentiment's important because they pay the bills.
Yeah, AJ, I mean, it's such an interesting situation all the way around, really, when you look at what happened again on Saturday against JMU and obviously the reaction to that. And it's not a surprising reaction, and it's not something that anybody should be surprised about, because like Mack Brown said, it was an unacceptable performance all the way around. And it was kind of a perfect storm too, because like you just talked about as well, you talked about, and we talked about it a lot during fall camp, just the lack of interest surrounding kind of Carolina. I wouldn't say interest necessarily, the lack of excitement around Carolina football, maybe, and optimism of maybe where and what this team can potentially do in year 6. And there's obvious factors for that. There's, not having that kind of high caliber quarterback the last 2 seasons, the collapses at the end of the year, and also the constant questions that surround a defense that just hasn't been able to really build and provide a consistently good product throughout a season, and through third defensive coordinator now. So, and then in game 4, there's already kind of fans talking like, we didn't look that good against Central, wasn't that impressive against Charlotte, we're field goal away from losing to Minnesota. And then you go and do what you get against JMU, and it's like, okay, things were always going to hit ahead. And then you combine that with the reaction of the program of, well, no players after the game, and, no players this week. And again, like you said, it's, what did you say? It's been 11 days since the last time you talked to Blake. Yeah. That's different, AJ, because Mack has always been someone, is something you've complimented and I've complimented him on, is how open he's been and how much availability they've given us. But we noticed a shift during fall camp a little bit too, of like, okay, this, and we talked about this. It's
late in fall camp. Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't, we're still getting a lot of access. Don't get me wrong, but it's not maybe the same as it has been,
Let me hit on this real fast, because I think what needs to be understood here, and make sure that we're understanding their side, like where their position, where they're coming from. And, I told the program, I said, I don't like it, but I understand it. That's Saturday night. And then Tuesday, I understand it, but I don't like it. I don't like it because I'm only looking at this through a journalistic lens, where I want to talk to these kids about Duke, because I'm moving the story forward. We've got a lot of Duke stuff coming up here at the tail end of this week, the latter half of this week. So that's the way I see the world. And we always look at content, that, hey, we get 4 players, we get content, right? We get to talk to some kids. But I totally understand where they're coming from, in the sense that, what do you think we're going to ask those kids?
Yeah.
What do we're going to ask about, even if they say don't ask about after the game in the locker room, we're still going to ask.
You have to.
And you don't want one of those kids saying something maybe they shouldn't. And then the fallout and about Mack and everything, you don't want to put it on them to have to speak to that, because they didn't do that. That's not them. They took part in the loss, but they didn't take part in what happened afterward, and how it's been portrayed, and how it's sort of taken off and gotten a life of its own. So I understand why we don't have the kids. And to be honest with you, if I was Mack Brown, if I was Jeremy Sharp, I'd do the same thing. If I was a parent of a player on that team, I would probably say, you know what, this is a good week to sit it out. Yeah. I understand people saying, hey, these guys don't want to play in the NFL. They got to talk about it. They got to handle it. But they're not in the NFL yet. Mm-hmm. I get it. They give us a tremendous amount of access. I think this week they need to insulate, and they are insulating. The only way you're going to fight through this, it's like a regroup. When you regroup, you go huddle. Mm-hmm. You go into the locker room at halftime. You don't stand out on the field in the end zone like in high school and eat oranges and talk to your position coach for 3 minutes. You literally go regroup. They are regrouping right now. They are insulating. We don't know what kind of team is going to take the field at Wallace Wade Stadium Saturday, but whatever team that is, they are working through all of this, and their head coach has to. I asked Mack Brown on Monday. I said, how long does it take you? You need to get through this first. And I asked him this because he clearly wasn't through it. We're 48 hours later. He hadn't fully worked past it. It was very apparent. I said, you have to get through this before you can get the coaches to work through it, and then get the players to work through it. So there was a significant timetable for that this week because they practiced Sunday. Usually they say, hey, we put the game to bed. I don't think this is something you can emotionally, psychologically put to bed just like that. There was no practice Monday. That's why we get the coaches and the press conferences, because we also got Chip Lindsey and Jeff Collins. Then they practiced Tuesday morning. Perhaps Tuesday morning was when everybody's nose was steered in a different direction. I don't know. We haven't been around the program ever since then. But the head coach has to move past it first before the staff can, and then the players can. I just don't think Mack had moved past it on Monday. It was a different Mack. And that's okay. I've said 1,000 times before, it's human nature. I feel for the dude.
Of course.
And would you want to be responsible for that product on the field and then all the stuff that came out afterwards and have to go face the media and ask and get question after question after question when you said, you're not going to talk about it anymore? Let's just talk about Duke. Well, we weren't interested in talking about Duke that much because the seriousness of all of this is at a level where it needed to be really kind of massaged pretty heavily and see what he had to say. And he was pretty consistent. He messed up and shouldn't have done it. And there have been a lot of national columnists writing their stories when they haven't been in Chapel Hill in years and they know everything that's going on. And I implore people to please pay attention to the local media that is around the program all the time. We and others like us are the ones who know what the hell's going on. Don't pay attention to the Nationals. They have no clue. No. How could they? I bet you Dan Wolken can't name anybody on Carolina's defense. But it's time for Mack to go.
Yeah.
I know, because when I was at Fox Sports, I've told you this 1,000 times. When I was at Fox Sports and I was doing the Panthers, the Hurricanes, the Bobcats before they went back to being the Hornets, I was covering the ACC and I had to do all this other stuff, Olympic qualifying and all that junk, that you cannot be an expert on everything.
No.
And if you're just the ACC with 18 schools, that's very hard. But it's probably doable for a seasoned veteran journalist. If it was, and I had to do some national stuff. So if it was too hard, and I was the interim national college basketball writer, actually, for Fox for 6 months. I had to write a story about Penn State basketball. Okay, I had to write one about Michigan State, which was fine because I knew Michigan State's program really well. I had been around Izzo, quite a bit in the previous, 10 years, 8 years. So I felt like I was comfortable with that. Penn State? I had to write a piece of my first assignment was Penn State basketball. I mean, come on. I don't even remember what I wrote, but I guarantee it sucked.
Yeah. And how could you know but so much? You're not living and breathing it like you do now. One program.
But the Nationals keep it going. So here we are, Wednesday, late Wednesday evening. This thing's going to hover around. We're going to talk about Duke. We're going to talk about the team. Unfortunately, lost in so much of this is Jacoby Criswell's performance. By the way, Omarion Hampton, 3 more rushing touchdowns, 139 yards. I saw something in the top 10 running backs in the country or something the other day, and he wasn't even on it. You see, 70-50 hurts everybody. Yeah,
of course it does, especially from a national.
You got to have rocks for brains to not think that he's one of the 3 best running backs in the country. You have Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, and you got the kid at Boise State. We see Omarion all the time, so it's easy for us to say, oh, he's the best one. I've never seen the other 2 in person, rarely on TV. So I don't know, but he's one of the top 3, but to not have him on the top 10 list, that's what 70-50 does, Jacob. 70-50 imploded everything that people thought about UNC. They thought the defense was better. They thought the program was just layering bricks like I've talked about. And maybe this is the year Mack breaks through. 70-50 in the comments afterward, boom, just blew it all to smithereens.
And I think just to hit on the Omarion real quick too, he's literally 3rd in the country in rushing and yards right now. And he only played 3.5 games. He didn't play half the Charlotte game. So I mean, I'd say he's a pretty good running back. So, but you're right. That's what happens, especially from a national perspective and a national narrative perspective, because most people watch the highlights that weren't at the game, don't cover the program, or just watch the game or just look at the score and say, oh yeah, obviously he's not very good, or obviously that team's not very good. We're not going to include him and stuff anymore. So again, that is the fallout we've talked about. And last thing I want to say before we kind of go into more specifics about Duke is I think everything we've talked about here also illustrates the importance and the timing of the podcast that we put out about the, I'll just say the title of it, the reality surrounding Carolina football, the unfortunate reality surrounding Carolina football, because what all the talk after Saturday's game was, from what we've seen and a lot of the chatter from fans on Twitter and on social media and on the boards, is fire Mack, clean house, start this thing over. He can't do it. He's not the right guy. And there was already chatter, before the season started. A lot of people's fans' opinion was already kind of aligned that way. So of course, when that happens in Game 4 at home and in a record-setting, historically bad fashion, that conversation is going to come up, and you're going to hear a lot more of it. But again, I think that stresses the importance of what we tried to do in painting the picture of, look, we're not defending, like I said 6 billion times in the podcast, we're not defending the last 2 years and how they ended. We're not defending the JMU score and the performance against JMU and countless other things that are legitimate, criticisms to have maybe about Mack Brown regime. We're not defending any of that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what's going on behind the scenes, particularly around the program. You shouldn't lose 70-50 at home to JMU. And that's exactly what Mack Brown came out and said after the game. But like we hit on in the podcast, and I think it needs to be stressed of, and you said it a few minutes ago too, AJ, it's when you say who you're going to get, a lot of fans say, well, you never know till you try. And anybody's better than Mack Brown. I mean, he's 70 some years old. These are the things that are thrown at him consistently. And I think what you mean by that isn't, of course, there's other people you can go out there and get. But when you look at the reality of Carolina football, you've got the winningest coach in program history currently leading the team. He's the most successful coach Carolina's had. Was the most active, winningest coach in college football right now. He's a Hall of Famer. He's won a national championship. He knows how to coach football, okay? The problem with it is, and this is what we tried to illustrate it, and this is what I want to talk about real quick, is it's not as simple as that. The issues in the I don't want to necessarily use the word problems, but the struggles run a little bit deeper than that. And no matter who comes in, they're going to be less equipped to handle it. That's just a fact. The more than likely, because of who Carolina would hire, probably going to get a little bit maybe less of a financial backing. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's my opinion, than maybe Mack would get. And not going to be as equipped and have as much clout as someone like Mack Brown does because of what I just listed about him. So I can understand the arguments in from the fan base, because there's still plenty of fans out there that are saying, get rid of Mack. You need to try something new. We need to bring someone in, a younger guy, to lead this program. But I think some of that is also shifted a little bit after the podcast. And that wasn't us trying to come out and say, yeah, guys, whoever's saying fire Mack, stop saying that. That wasn't the point of the podcast at all. Yeah. But trying to just provide a little bit more context around it. You know what I mean?
People aren't thinking about what Wednesday afternoon at 4:15 is like for Mack Brown. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking about what Monday afternoon at 2:00 is like for him, or 8:30. Or whatever. They think about Saturday and sometimes the press conference. They don't think about all the other realities. Now, in fairness to the university and the athletic department, because I was pretty strong in my comments about that. Mack has gotten more money than any previous football coach as far as what to do. They immediately built a $75 million locker room. Mm-hmm. They immediately put in the artificial turf. They did some things immediately that he asked for, and he got it. They've gotten some recent renovations. If you go through the Keenum Football Center now, it's fantastic. They even got a Carolina blue basketball court.
But doesn't NIL have to play a factor in that?
Hold on, but there are a lot of. I agree with you, but what I'm saying, I'm just outlining the fact that he's gotten a lot, but he's not getting what other programs there are other programs in the ACC that are still doing more. They have more with NIL. They have more. You look at the money that Virginia's spending right now. They're showing a commitment. They're spending, or they're like, okay, let's make a push here and see what we can do. And they're doing it with a coach who doesn't have any job security right now, Tony Elliott. So I think that Mack has been very good at being able to win a lot of those battles that I was talking about, but he doesn't win all of them because he asks for everything. Texas, all Mack would have to say is, I need, and they would say, okay, and he wouldn't have to tell them what it is. They interrupt, say, you got it. So at North Carolina, they want to know what it is. They got to count the beans a little bit more because there's as much money there. There's 28 sports for Bubba Cunningham to manage. There's a $130 million budget for Bubba Cunningham to manage. And basketball doesn't bring in as much revenue as it should because the lower bowl seats are free, because those are lifetime seats for the people sitting in there. Carolina's been losing money in the lower bowl for 20 years. 25 years or 15 years, about 20 years. They've been losing money. If those seat licensing deals had an expiration date and they had to charge people for that, the school would have a lot more money. So there are areas where UNC needs to kind of pick at to try to make a little bit more money. That's why that silly $6,000 a game section is in the
temporary suite or whatever you want to call it.
Just get a little bit more money.
Yeah.
Need a little bit more money. And so that's how the budget has to be run. The ACC does well with the TV money, but it's not the Big Ten or SEC. And I think there's a panic meter that as each day passes, UNC and all the ACC schools are getting further behind. That's why Florida State has humiliated itself with these stupid lawsuits that are not going to work. And Clemson's been more dignified with it. Well, we're going to sort of tag along a little bit here, but we're okay if we stay.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida State has dug itself a hole of you know what, and they're paying a rent for it right now with public perception. So everybody is seeing those two conferences grow and grow and grow. And if you're the coach, it feels like less. So it's more frustrating because you're going to lose a guy to Florida like UNC did, or to another school like at Georgia. An in-state player goes to Georgia because there's an NIL deal there waiting for him. And North Carolina doesn't promise NIL deals to recruits because it's still against NCAA rules. But what they do is they say, here's what guys at your position are making. So they can show them a layout. But let's say, for the sake of discussion, these numbers are strictly the sake of discussion. Let's say the starting offensive linemen at North Carolina are making $80,000 with their collective deals. Well, you go to other schools in the ACC, including one in this state, they're making more. Then you look at the SEC, and if you're going to battle a kid from Auburn that might go to Auburn, and in Auburn, just to be on the roster, he's making 100, and if he's a starting offensive lineman, he's making 225. And North Carolina is saying, well, you're going to get 36, be on scholarship, and 80 to start at tackle. Well, these kids are making financial decisions. We saw what the quarterback from UNLV did today. I mean, how insane. I wouldn't touch that kid with a 1,000-foot pole.
Yeah, that's
undefeated. They're ranked and undefeated, and he's walking away because of an NIL dispute. You reap what you sow, right? So
college football, though. That's just what it is.
He'll be Auburn's quarterback next year, making $2.5 million or something.
Yeah,
and they'll go 6-6.
Yeah.
So you understand my point. So he gets a lot, but there's so much more that they need. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from in the football building, but there's also frustration in the athletic department and the university in general, because they're judged by a commitment because of how much they give. And maybe they could give more, or they could get more creative to generate more revenue, which I think that they've done a mediocre job at best with, when you look at how they could totally change tailgating, where they could rent out things to generate revenue, because it's a very difficult area to tailgate in, but they could get more creative with it. They haven't. There might be some legalities there that I don't know about, so I could be speaking with a little bit of ignorance there, but nevertheless, it doesn't look like anything's been tried, or not much has been tried. But at the same time, the commitment can only go so far if there's only so much cash in the coffer. So it's not, I didn't want to make it sound like the school doesn't care about football. That's not true. The school does. The Blue Zone says hello. The recent renovations of the Keenum Football Center say hello. They have plans for that press box and the luxury suites. I think they ought to get it going. You get those 42 luxury suites at $1 million a year, or $500,000 a year, or whatever they would charge. That's cash. You know what, Mac? We can afford to give the offensive coaches a raise this year. You know what, Mac? That is that coach that demands $1 million because he's going to get $1 million from Arkansas, and we used to only be able to pay him $700. Maybe we could pay him $900, and he wants to coach with you, so he's going to come. Yeah. You guys would be amazed at how often these kinds of things happen. And ultimately it affects the football program. So has nothing to do with 70 to 50. Nothing to do with that. But there are other factors there all the way around that a new coach would have to deal with, and the school is trying to navigate. I mean, they're not just sitting around saying, win or lose, we don't care. The Bubba's not doing that. But they need more cash.
It's the top and bottom of it, yeah. And it's a double-edged sword too, right? Because let's say Carolina does get more investment in the football program, more money does come flooding in. It doesn't necessarily guarantee success. I mean, it's not as simple as just let's just throw more money at it. But at the same time, AJ, it might not guarantee success, but not doing that is also more than likely not going to guarantee success either. So it is a risk. It's like anything in life. In order to accomplish something or do something big, or, in business, right? Maybe make a successful, well-run, money-making business. There's risks that come along with that. There's initial investments that come along with that at the time they don't guarantee you anything, but in doing so, it'll definitely put you in a better position to do that, especially when you look at the changing landscape of NIL, which is what I raised up, which I mentioned to you a few minutes earlier, like he might be the most financially backed coach at Carolina so far, and that's fair. But with NIL coming in too, this is an unprecedented landscape that, yeah, of course he is, because if not, then you have no chance of doing anything with how things have changed. So it's such an interesting double-edged sword kind of conversation that you can have, because you can see both sides to the argument. But at the end of the day, with how NIL has changed things so much, you just talked about the UNLV quarterback. The money is as important as it's ever been. And when you're looking around the league at a program like Virginia, who's just struggled mightily over the last 10, 15, 20 years, you can look at maybe some of the investment they're putting in. I'm not privy to those numbers. I don't cover UVA, but you can see it kind of from the outside looking in and say, okay, well, something is changing, and it looks like they're trying to at least do something over there with a coach that, may not work out, very more likely than not probably won't work out there. So there are risks involved with doing that, but in order to maybe take that next step and have a better shot at getting the program to a better position, there is going to have to be financial investment that, again, I'm not someone who knows how to balance those books and deal with those numbers, but that's what it's ultimately going to take to have a more realistic shot at getting to the level that I think a lot of Carolina fans hope the program can get to at some point.
Yeah, for the record, my wife pays our bills.
So my wife does too.
I'm already way behind in this discussion in that sense. One of the things I probably what I've heard the most from fans when it gets down to NIL and donating and their responsibility and being a part of the program, which they could be more now than ever before, is why are people going to spend money when you have the collapses? You have the no-show against Virginia Tech when you're top 10 and Sam's supposed to win the Heisman, and all that was blown up in 20 minutes in Blacksburg.
Yeah. And I get it.
And then a couple weeks later, you have the absolute implosion at Georgia Tech. You can't beat Georgia Tech. You lost 3 in a row to NC State in highly unspectacular fashion. You had the collapses the last 2 years, losing at home to UVA, which is pitiful. 244 yards rushing by Georgia Tech in the fourth quarter. Those things weigh on a fan base. They weigh on a fan base. And the more it happens, the less inclined they're going to be to dig into the wallet and shell something out. Let's go back to 2019. Sell out, sell out, sell out. Go back to the atmosphere. I actually popped up on Twitter yesterday when I was scrolling through the Chaz Surratt interception to beat Duke.
I was 10 feet away from that. It was
electric. You go back and look at all of our photos from all the angles. I think you shot that night. No,
I was 10 feet away from that.
Yeah, and it's full everywhere. The Miami game, full everywhere. Even the App State game, which was an afternoon game, full everywhere. I think all their games that year home were full, and they had great atmospheres, and there was a buzz. COVID killed that the next year. That's a team that would have gotten a pretty good response from the fans as well. But by the time fans came back in, 2001 occurred. And then 2002, man, this team's pretty good. This Drake May something else, 9-1. The next year, 6-0. Boy, this is the year Mack breaks through. So asking people to dig into their wallets after that is very difficult because, as you and I have been saying for years, this is a program that has not rewarded the investment.
Yeah.
Basketball rewards the investment. If your thing are Olympic sports, I mean, what Olympic sports is North Carolina not good at? Softball just never has been that good. But they've gotten better in gymnastics. Is growing. Volleyball has grown a lot in the last 15 years. We all know what both soccer programs, what field hockey, what lacrosse and both sports does, what baseball does. It's all over. Fencing, they're swimming and diving. They win stuff. Tennis, they win national championships.
Track
they're
and
really
field,
good at everything else. Those programs reward whatever investments they get too. But the one program that requires the biggest investment has consistently not given the fans a return on they have not rewarded their investment, whether it's emotional, whether it's in person doing minimal by buying tickets, or whether you're a dude that writes the Rams Club a check for $5,000 every year because you want to help pay for scholarships and you want them to have more money to pay for things to make life better for the athletes. That hasn't been rewarded. So the next coach that comes in, whether it's a guy in this winter or it's a guy 8 years from now and Max sticks around, the likelihood is they're going to face a similar situation. Of course, if Max around 8 more years, it means they win big.
Yeah.
So that might change things. But there's a lot of stuff at play here. So it's not just the administration, and it's not blame. If I were a fan, I'm a diehard of the Baltimore Orioles. I went when they were bad, and my wife and I went a couple of years ago, took our daughter. The Orioles had a 16-game losing streak end the night before, and I kind of wanted them, or it was a 15-game. I wanted them to lose because I wanted to show up. The one game I go to that year with them on a 16-game losing streak. Just because I wanted to prove my fandom, right? I get that, but there's not a lot of people like that.
Yeah,
but I wasn't buying a bunch of gear saying, "Well, this might help him get a free agent." I've never thought that way. I was just like, "Win some damn games." And by the way, they clinched the playoff spot.
I know. Congrats to you on that. I know you won a couple weeks ago. You were a little like glass half empty on
this
maybe the
Orioles podcast, but they're getting their guys back again. So. Baseball's a sport that kills optimism and it breeds optimism at the same time. So
yeah, that's what happens when you play as many games.
My point stands about the reward thing. There's so much at play here. North Carolina can win. If you go back historically, Jacob, the 40s were phenomenal. They were good before the 40s. They were really good in the 30s. 1924, look it up. There was an interest in football. They had big crowds. The choo-choo era was phenomenal. And, of course, when Choo-Choo and Art Weiner both walked out the door, Carolina football collapsed. And in that decade of the 50s, suddenly this thing called ACC basketball became a big deal. Everett Case was selling out Reynolds Coliseum. Carolina wins a basketball title in 57, beating the great Wilt Chamberlain. They're undefeated. Duke gets on a roll. And all of a sudden, everything changed, and those schools all struggled in football at the same time. And by the time Bill Dooley got to North Carolina and made football matter again with 3 yards in a cloud of dust, the old trench fighter, greatest nickname ever, the old trench fighter, then it started getting better at Clemson. It started getting better a few other places. And Carolina was very good at times in the 70s, outstanding in the early 80s, and outstanding at the end of the Mack era. It can still be done. It's a very appealing place for a lot of kids to go. They love the swag. They love the colors. They love the uniform. They love the campus. They love being a football player there. But not everything is in place right now like it would need to be. But it's a double-edged sword, man.
Yeah.
Don't collapse, we'll send money. Well, send money and we'll have better defenders. We won't collapse.
Yeah, this is, I promise, is the last thing I'll say before we move on to Duke. But
that's right. We got to talk about Duke.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And exactly by saying double-edged sword, you took the word out of my mouth again, because you're illustrating a fantastic point, AJ. Fans have not been rewarded, so the want to invest in the program is not there. The problem with that is if now in this changing NIL landscape, especially if there is no a lack of financial backing going into the football program, maybe what's necessary to really be able to take that next step, then your chances of getting to that next step are even lower and even slimmer year by year. Yeah. And AJ, we're privy to maybe, and we're privy to maybe some of the players Carolina could have got at some point, right? It's NIL and factors that go in that respect. And that also breeds fan excitement, right? If you've got maybe this guy and that guy, they're maybe a little bit bigger name, more talented, or whatever it may be.
One move that could have been made this last winter.
I know.
But there was no ability. People say Mack can't track these guys. Look at what they got in the portal. They had to spend their collective on keeping guys. One dude could have changed everything.
And when you maybe learn about more of that situation, like we have, the financial difference, I think, is kind of safe to say it wasn't even really close. No. And that, again, is the problem, is because
it wasn't a very long conversation.
That also breeds excitement. That also breeds a better product on the field, which might lead to more investment. So, again, it comes back to this kind of conundrum that we could sit here and talk about for 8 hours.
See, the interest in being a part of the program was there. The interest in fitting in to a role was there. The NIL commitment wasn't even close. And it wasn't because there was an unwillingness, just wasn't there. You know, these have been some tough financial times for some people. If you got $50 on your budget for the market, you can't go buy these new seedless grapes for $8, even though you love grapes, because it puts you over $50. So sorry, grapes, I'm not going to buy you today. I got to stick with more pound cake.
That's a great analogy, really.
Drawing something there.
But again, it's something we could sit here and talk about forever because it's such a fascinating back and forth. What about this? And well, if you look at that, then what about this side of the argument? It's just so fascinating. But I think between this podcast and the last podcast we did, I guess we've talked about this situation for over an hour and a half combined. So I think
let's talk football.
Yeah, let's talk some football, man. Because AJ, as the old saying goes, I don't know if winning necessarily solves everything in this situation, but it could solve a heck of a whole lot over these next few weeks, and at least from a fan sentiment and excitement perspective.
It cures a lot of ills.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, especially when you can go to Durham and beat your rival. But AJ, again, 4 p.m. kick in Durham, Duke versus Carolina. Going to be a fun one. Carolina 5-0 in the Mack Brown 2.0 era against Duke, in 65-40-4 all time against the Blue Devils. Carolina also scored 38 plus in the last 4 meetings against the Blue Devils, but have also given up 35 plus in the last 2 meetings. So been some shootouts over the years, to say the least, particularly in this Mack Brown 2.0 era. But funny enough, I don't necessarily know if I expect that this Saturday, but who knows? If history shows us anything, it will be. But
what's the over-under?
Over-under is 55.5 right now. So it's not a crazy high score.
30-25 just misses the over. 30-25. I don't know if I see 30-25 in this one.
No, based on last year's score, the over under would have been set at 90 plus. So that kind of shows you everything. And even going back to previous year, 38-35. I mean, that kind of shows you it's high, low 70 plus. So
that was the Drake to Antoine Green play.
Yeah, which I was, again, 2 feet away from. Pretty cool experience down there. But again, AJ, Duke 4-0. Let's dive into Duke a little bit more. Let's talk about them and kind of preview this game a little bit. Duke 4-0 wins over Elon, at Northwestern, UConn, and at Middle Tennessee State last weekend. Obviously under first-year head coach Manny Diaz, former head coach at Miami, also worked under Mack Brown at Texas. So a little bit of history there, which we've heard of before because they have faced off as head coaches since Mack came back in late 2018, 2019 season. I'm going to dive into some numbers about Duke real quick because I do think they're a solid team. And I do think, like you've talked about before previously, they're a very physical team. And of course, we're going to expect that on Saturday, particularly in a rivalry game. It'll be very interesting to see how Carolina responds to that. But
before you do that real fast, I was chuckling about Manny Diaz because, I don't think they've had warm embraces in quite some time. But I thought Mack's greatest line of the presser on Monday was he was asked about Manny, and he said, I'm paraphrasing here, now that Manny's been a head coach for a while, he says sometimes when you're a head coach, you got to make some tough decisions. It's one of the decisions you'd rather not have to make, but you got to make them. He said, now that Manny's been a head coach for a while, I think he understands that now. I think he understands it better. So I thought that was a great line.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that's so because so many guys get fired in football coaching. So Manny's in a good spot right now, I think. Mm-hmm. So got to face Mack every year as long as both of them are at both places. But I thought that was a great line because in the media world, we're like, hey, spicy little matchup here. Manny hates Mack. I don't know if that hatred is there more. It might fuel some stuff, but that was a great line by Mack.
Yeah, it was a great line. And I guess now,
an old coach who's been around, understands lay of the land. That's had a lot of dudes hate him when he got rid of him that later on understood. Hey, you know what? Part of the business.
Exactly.
Nothing personal.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. But I guess it kind of technically is Manny Diaz's job to hate Mack now, since he's a coach at Duke. They're kind of supposed to hate each other, right? No, Mack doesn't hate anybody, I don't think. But
the Duke coaches I've known, because I used to cover them a lot when I was just doing the whole league in the whole area. I don't know any. I knew a basketball coach that hated Carolina,
which is
he had a long name, began with a K. And with an I.
I wonder who that could be.
There was a long time there where he hated Roy, and I've been on both sides of those conversations.
Oh, yeah.
But football, no. I mean, David Cutcliffe, I think he grew to dislike Carolina more than when he first got there. I don't think
Elko probably wasn't there far enough.
Yeah, they were. Really. The other ones were just trying to survive.
Yeah.
They didn't care about Carolina.
Right.
But,
yeah,
I think Cutcliffe ended up probably hating. Cutcliffe seemed to end up hating a lot of stuff.
Yeah, especially a little bit later in his tenure. Yeah, when things maybe started not going off the rails. Well, he did a great job at Duke overall, really, when you look at what he did. But yeah, I think at the end of the job, he that may have shifted a little bit, which again is understandable. I always say, man, bring back hating people in sports. I think it's absolutely, you can't hate anybody anywhere else, but you can bring it back in sports, man. It's okay to hate people in sports. It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, back to just some quick kind of stats about Duke and just looking into the numbers. I know you have some numbers as well, but interestingly enough, because I think Malik Murphy's done a pretty dang good job this year statistically. I mean, I think he's 11 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions, over 1,000 yards passing already. Statistically, he's having a pretty good year early in this one. But when you dive into the offensive numbers a little bit more about Duke, you realize, oh, actually, statistically, the third worst offense in the league right now through 4 games, averaging just over 360 yards per game. And they're not a team rushing wise that has done much. And I know passing, maybe because of Murphy's skill set, is something they're looking to do a little bit more, but just 418 rushing yards on the season. But they are in the top half of the league in passing yards, do have more than Carolina does right now. So that shows you that that's kind of the strength of that offense right now. That could obviously shift at some point, but so far through 4 games, the strength of that offense has really been Malik Murphy and his arm, because go look at his rushing stats when you get a chance, and I think you'll be a little bit surprised. Yeah, that's what they do.
He is a go through progression, get rid of the ball guy.
Yeah, and I know Carolina fans will like to hear this, but I do like a lot of the skill sets that he has. I do think he's a talented quarterback. But then you flip over the defensive side of the ball, AJ, it's kind of an opposite story. Second best defense in the league right now, statistically, in terms of yards per game, right behind Miami, who's obviously the best team right now. Well, arguably with Clemson, 259 yards per game. Top passing defense in the ACC, but interestingly enough, are in the bottom half of the league in rushing defense. So I've got a couple of keys to the game based on what I just talked about, but I don't want to hit on that quite yet. I want to get your thoughts on Duke, because I know you also do have a piece coming out later this week, talking to someone who covers Duke, which is going to be really interesting.
It'll be out probably by the time this runs.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to post it. Yeah, because I'm posting it as soon as we finish this. And you'll have this edit. We'll run it in an hour or so. I just want to get it out there. But Connor O'Neill does a phenomenal job in the Rivals Network covering Duke. He also runs the Wake Forest site. Does a great job on both. It's a ton of work. The dude works his off. Mm-hmm. And we did 5 questions about Duke. And with respect to Malik Murphy, he said he can hit every throw, but they're bringing him along slowly. And they could afford to do that because they're playing games they thought they should win. And really, in 3 of the games they played against teams that you probably would want your offense to be more productive. They were pretty productive against Middle Tennessee. They had 26 points against Elon. They had 26 against UConn, I think it was.
Yeah.
UConn stinks. So they haven't been super prolific, but they've been learning, slowly massaging that dough. And maybe they're ready to break out against Carolina. Certainly Carolina presents opportunities for explosive plays. We've seen that in 2 out of 4 games so far. Defensively, the thing I like about Duke, they give up some rushing yards, but Connor said they don't give up nearly as many explosives as you would think, given how aggressive they are. There's a risk reward to the way Duke goes about playing defense, which is why they get a lot of TFLs. They lead the nation in TFLs. They're second in the nation in sacks. They have 20 different players who have gotten at least one TFL. They have 11 different players who have been in on a sack. Mm-hmm. So they roll guys in, and they're productive. So I think that's the kind of thing Carolina's going to have to really, really be cognizant of, because the offensive line, which hasn't really played a ton together as a starting unit because of injuries, and it's already very young as it is, they're going to be challenged a lot in this game because Duke's going to stress them. And then we're going to find out about Jacoby Criswell dealing with immediate duress at times. It's one thing to drop back and the duress closes in on you, but when you drop back and there's like a semblance of a jailbreak, you got to make a decision, and Jacoby's not going to get out there with his legs nearly as much as Connor Harrell would, so he's going to have to get rid of the ball. He threw 2 interceptions last week. It opens the door for interceptions. So I think how Carolina protects Jacoby, and if he doesn't turn the ball over, if they protect him pretty well and he doesn't turn the ball over, I think the Tar Heels will be in this thing to win it, have a chance to win. Of course, it's hard to say that and fully believe it after 70-50, but maybe 70-50 was just a Murphy's Law. It all came out at one time, and it was an aberration. We don't really know. We don't really know at all.
TBD, yeah.
And they will find out, especially offensively against Duke. Now, if Malik Murphy picks them apart and they hit on a bunch of explosives, if Jordan Moore has a field day, and if he's as open as JMU's receivers were, then there's going to be some hard discussions and hard questions from the media, because that would totally go against everything that they said had changed on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I'll just go into my keys real quick, because I know you just kind of hit on yours a little bit right there. But defensively, man, and this was my biggest criticism, really, particularly in the first half when things started against JMU really going downhill, because it was, again, the kind of that late first quarter, second quarter when things really blew up, and it was just, it was over at that point. Yeah. You got to get pressure on the damn quarterback, man. Again, we've talked about it the last 6 seasons, man. Carolina's defensive line has really, really struggled at times. And we saw an improved product at the beginning of last year. We saw an improved product in the first 3 games of this year. Heck, Jahvaree Ritzy's, tied for second in the country at sacks right now. I mean, Carolina's defensive line has performed relatively well, but the regression we saw on Saturday against JMU was almost hard to believe. And at some point, Malik Murphy's having a good year this year. I mean, he is statistically. And this is one of those games you can look at when you look at the setting, when you look at who he's playing, being home against Carolina, the rival. They can already smell a little bit of blood right there. I think anybody would be surprised if this could potentially be a breakout performance for him, where you really start to say, okay, this guy really might be the real deal here, especially against the Carolina defense coming off what they came off against. But you've got to get pass rush on him. There were so many times against JMU where that quarterback, it felt like he was standing back there for 10 minutes before anybody even got close to him. And he was a guy who was comfortable rolling out like a Murphy is. So you've got to establish that pass rush early. You've got to get pressure on that quarterback, because, AJ, as we've talked about, football, I always say this, it is an oversimplification of a sport, but football to me is a very simple thing, especially defensively. If you want to look very bad defensively, go out there and don't get pressure on the quarterback. You can make go back a couple years to Carolina losing at State at home to, what was it? Finley. I forgot his first name. Third string quarterback, and just all day back there. And he looked pretty good, because when you don't get pressure on a quarterback and you've got all day to throw back there, he's going to look pretty good. Anybody would. This is ACC, especially a guy like Malik Murphy. So got to do that. And defensively, man up and make plays, man. I mean, AJ, at some point, X's and O's kind of go out the window a little bit when you get demolished, like give up 53 in the first half to JMU. And at some point, as a group, these are talented players. These are not, it's not like Carolina doesn't have talent on defense. Let's not rewrite history here. At some point, you've got to go out there individually and win your battles and make plays. And that's what has to be done on Saturday. That defense, it's not all about what the defensive coordinator calls and the scheme here and the scheme there. Of course, that's important. But at the end of the day, you've got to go out there and make plays and make things happen on the football field, or you're going to have days like Carolina.
It's trust.
Yeah, it's trust.
Trust goes into that, because Jeff Collins said Monday that a lot of guys were trying to go outside their
do too much, do what they're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah, so it starts with communication. A thing about Malik Murphy that you brought up about getting pressure on him, he doesn't run. He doesn't run.
Yeah.
He's also thrown an interception in each game.
Mm-hmm.
So he threw an interception against Elon's defense, threw one against UConn's defense, and he threw one against Middle Tennessee State's defense. There's no shame in throwing one against Northwestern, especially up there in that bizarre setup that they're playing home games in this year. So there's an opportunity if Carolina gets pressure, they get him to roll, and he's not going to run, that Carolina could maybe force some turnovers there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it just again, you get a quarterback uncomfortable there, maybe forces, Duke to try to run the ball a little bit more, something they haven't been very successful at so far this year. For me, it all starts up there in the trenches. It's not rocket science, but I think this game is vitally important for Carolina to try to get back to some kind of resemblance of what we saw in those first three games, especially on that defensive line. It all starts up there. And then offensively, AJ, for me, it's kind of the same. It's the same message no matter who Carolina's playing, in my opinion, when you especially look at the uncertainty around quarterback. I know Criswell had a really, statistically a good performance in a lot of ways against JMU. But again, it's still too early to kind of be like, well, he's, really, we don't know. He's still an unknown quantity in a lot of ways. Got to establish the run. And you got to do it early because you got one of the best running backs in the country. And when you look at Duke defensively, bottom half in the league in rushing defense, try to exploit that because that's your biggest weapon there. And I think if you can establish that early on, play physical at the line of scrimmage, because again, we've talked about Duke being a physical team. We fully expect Duke to come out and be physical especially from the jump at home. But if Carolina can respond to that by establishing a run game through their best player, I think that's going to give them a better opportunity offensively because that will open up things in the passing game, and that will make Carolina look better across the board offensively. So you got to ride that horse in Hampton, man. You got to do it early and hope he can get rolling because at the end of the day, man, he's your guy. And when it comes to playing in ACC play, he has to be productive. And from what we've seen this year, he has been. But can that be a consistent start to finish thing? Because I even think against JMU, AJ, first half, JMU did a really good job defending Hampton. I know it opened up a little bit in the second half.
They hit him at the line of scrimmage and behind a lot more than anybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's nothing that's going to infuse this team with more confidence than running the ball well early. Because what that'll do is that'll give them control of the flow of the game. And they can play complementary football. This defense, any defense, is going to be better with complementary football. Mack wanted to get to that more because he said sometimes last year, we score too fast. People are like, you want to hit on 75-yarders every time, but you wear your defense out. And if they're still giving up scores, you may score in 1 minute, but if the opponent scores in 4 minutes and they score every time, it's still an even game, and your defense is what's going to get worn out toward the end. So I think establishing Omarion, having him just pound and just send a message to Duke, you can't stop him. Like they did in 2000 or 2020 when they went there in the COVID year. Carolina scored the first 7 times they had the ball, and Javonte and Michael just ran right at him. And then Sam threw off those inside runs. And I don't know what it was that Carolina had. It was 42-10 at the half.
56-44 final.
Yeah, and they scored their first possession of the third quarter. So they scored touchdowns in the first 7, ran away with it, and they were doing anything they wanted. But the key was they were running the ball. So run it right at them. And if they can have success there and they can keep the defense off the field a little bit, I think that's going to give everybody confidence. Because you know what happens when the defense isn't on the field? It's not giving up explosive plays.
Yeah, it's a great point.
It's not having miscommunication. It's not missing tackles. It's not overrunning a quarterback on a blitz. It's not personal foul, late hit. It's not roughing the passer. It's not lining up off sides in neutral zone. When the defense is on the sideline, it's not making any of those mistakes. And that's what this team needs to do to win this game. Can they do it? Absolutely. They're insulating this week. And Mack Brown has been around before. Someone pointed out today, in his 6th year at Oklahoma or at Texas, he lost to Oklahoma 63-14. And my response was in his 8th year, he won a national championship. Ugly happens. Now, ugly's happened too much in Mack Part 2. And
Absolutely.
Last Saturday was, to me, peak ugliness. But they have an opportunity to move on, to cut the cord from that, from a football perspective. The narrative and the conversation is still going to continue. But for how they feel about themselves, they have a chance to cut the cord to that feeling that has lingered and have a new feeling at Duke Saturday. I think they can absolutely win this game. I'm not picking them to win.
I don't blame you.
It's just too hard to. You got to have a lot of faith with something I haven't seen or heard because we haven't talked to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they can. And I think that they can be very efficient offensively in a game like this if they can protect Jacoby.
Mm-hmm. I've said it to a couple people on Twitter, so I'll go ahead and privately as well. I gotta, for whatever reason, AJ, there's absolutely zero reason for me to have this. I've got a sneaky suspicion Carolina wins on Saturday.
Sometimes gut instinct. You've been right before.
I know. I've been wrong right. many times.
Sometimes you and I have very different picks, and you've been right, and you can't explain it. But when you're around it as much as you and I have been, sometimes your gut instinct is your best weapon because you get a feel for it. And if you have a feel for it, I would roll with it if I were you, because I think tactically, from a talent standpoint, Carolina has more talent. Tactically, I think that they can hit Duke in certain areas they can beat Duke at. So if last week never happened, if this game were last and we'd already seen Jacoby with a start, it wouldn't be out of the realm to pick North Carolina. I just think that the lingering effects, it's just hard to go from that look to 4-0, physical, confident, up-and-coming quarterback, new coach, a defense that can do things that hurt Carolina a lot. They can play into that. To me, that's why I see Carolina losing, but you could be very well right. And you know, I think if they win and they control the game that way, what a great story that's going to be.
Oh, I know. Absolutely.
That's the kind of story that'll write itself. Yeah.
And again, you want to shift the vibe. I'm not saying from a, like we've talked about a lot in this podcast, I'm not talking about the whole program as a whole and the administration, the future, all that stuff, but you want to shift the narrative from a fan perspective right now from what happened last week. Go beat your rival in Durham. And like you said, control the game a little bit. Winning solves everything. It's not going to solve everything in this case because of what we've highlighted. It's just not. But in terms of the immediate, in terms of this season, in terms of maybe the fans getting back on board a little bit of like, okay, maybe this season, maybe that was just a catastrophic blip and maybe it won't happen again. But you go to Durham and you have a good game and you play well on both sides of the ball, especially defensively, have a bounce back performance in which you say, okay, that happened, but we can right this ship a little bit. Even at, a week, 7 days later, we can right this ship a little bit. That's going to change the narrative a little bit. So
they said there was a lot to learn from. Mack kept saying he has a lot to learn from his comments. They have a lot to learn as a team. Jeff Collins kept saying they got a lot to learn. Even Chip, they had 5 turnovers. Pick 6 went for a touchdown, a fumble, and 2 fumbles. 2 fumbles ended up with JMU scoring on the next play, and then the block punt. 29 points were scored because of turnovers. Mm-hmm. So take that away, it's 41. They still got blitzed. 41 points, but it's a little different. It's very possible that there's an us against the world mindset going on over there.
I was just going to say
they have a lot of older dudes, and this program smacked into a fork in the road this past weekend. This team in the program, a lot of older guys with pride, guys that came back to not have crap like this happen and to enhance their NFL stock. And NFL stock isn't going to go up when you get rolled by JMU.
No.
So there could be a major, the pride that we didn't see Saturday might have surfaced this week. Mm-hmm. And us against the world. How many times has Mack Brown done the us against the world thing in his life? Probably not much.
No.
Probably a hard sell most of the time, but it's an easy sell this week because everybody's dumping on him. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons they didn't want the kids to talk to us. They don't want them to have to answer nothing but negatives.
Yeah.
I get it. If I was a coach, I'd do the same thing. So insulation, us against the world, come out with physicality, play with pride, play with a purpose, play for each other, play 1 of 11, as they like to say. It's entirely plausible they can do that and play very well and win. And we look back at last week and say, man, that was one ugly speed bump that they crashed into. It's like the shocks died in the car and they crashed into a speed bump.
It's fascinating, man. I mean, I'm literally looking forward to Saturday. I'll be there. We'll be there in the press box. Looking forward to that one. Always enjoy going over there. I know Carolina fans don't want to hear that.
I like going over there too. It's a good place to watch a game.
Cool. Yeah. Great place to watch a game. I mean, I know it's not, some massive, crazy stadium or anything like that, but not a bad seat in that house.
Anything Carolina goes there, it's a good atmosphere when Carolina goes there.
Absolutely, man.
There's not a bad seat in the house, and Duke's playing well. And I think it's healthy that Duke and all the teams around here play well. And they have a chance to go 5-0, man.
I know.
And then they got FSU coming into town.
Ooh, that could be very interesting.
So there's a lot to play for Manning's group.
Yeah.
And Manning's trying to get a little trying to get a little, what would I say? I guess validation.
Vindicated a little bit. Yeah, validation.
Yeah, a little validation. They may have run him out he probably thinks they ran him out too soon at Miami. Miami does that.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they turn on a coach, it's time to go.
It's over, man. It doesn't take much down there either.
Yeah. So Mario better go undefeated or he's going to be out.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it, man. I think Carolina fans should be looking forward to it as well. I know they will be. When game time starts at 4:00 on Saturday, there'll be a lot of people believing again. So we'll see what happens on Saturday. And yeah, man, it should be a fun one, as it always is when Carolina and Duke
can't wait
meet up. Yeah, man. And maybe Mack will improve to 6-0 in his 2.0 era against Carolina. If history shows us anything, AJ, like it's shown us with the Carolina NC State rivalry over the past couple of years, Carolina win should be on the cards for Saturday.
By the way, Mack has won 13 straight as a head coach against Duke.
Wild stat, isn't it, man? It's almost like he can't lose. Maybe that's where my my unrealistic optimism comes from. I'm just focusing too much on that. Mack doesn't lose to Duke. AJ, come on, man. They'll beat them on Saturday. It's fascinating to cover from a journalistic perspective. I'll tell you that for sure. But yeah, man. And again,
journalistic wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. And guys, if we talked about him earlier a lot, but if you haven't seen the pods we did, earlier this week, and obviously I think we did on Sunday and the other one came out on Monday, the drops, go watch those. You'll find them on our YouTube channel. Get a little bit more information, especially about what we talked about today. So go check those out if you haven't seen those already. And yeah, we appreciate you guys watching as always. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones, another edition of the UNC football show. Let's do this, AJ. Let's do this. Let's see. I want to see who's optimistic out there. Like the video below if you think Carolina wins on Saturday. I want to see what the optimism is out there. I'm very intrigued.
Remember, was it the long one? It was a long one we did for Monday.
I think
no, it was the one I did. It was the one about what Mack said. Mm-hmm. It was one I did in the press box in the open air part of the coach's booth when my shirt got sweaty.
Yeah, it was 3 things.
No, it wasn't 3 things. It was, I think it was the other. Maybe it was 3 things.
I think it was because you hinted at us doing podcasts in that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I told people, I said, if you got to the end of this, tell me what color my shirt is. The sweaty version of the shirt, not the dry version of the shirt. And we gave away 3 1-year subscriptions.
Oh, wow. You're giving away 3, AJ. Okay.
Yeah.
I see you. 3, man.
So you need to stay tuned to the 3 thing. We might start doing a question and give away a free sub at some point during our 3 things podcast from now on.
Not always at the end. I don't want to see people skipping to the end. Some point during the podcast, we'll put something out there.
Exactly. We might just throw it out there in the middle.
Yeah. Who knows, man? Might throw it out there 10 minutes in. You just have to wait and stay tuned for that. But yeah, we'll be back on doing 3 things, obviously, on Saturday. So no matter what happens, make sure you guys stay tuned for that as well. Keep it locked to charlillustrated.com. All your coverage. I don't know if you guys have heard, but basketball practice started. ACC schedule came out.
Next Friday on the 4th, October 4th, we get every player. That's right. And I'm demanding that you get over there.
I'll be there.
We get to talk to every player on scholarship. We get to watch practice. We get to shoot the first 20 minutes. We get to watch the whole practice. We also get to talk to Hubert. Cannot wait. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's always a fun one.
The storylines are going to be in abundance with this basketball team. I said that about football, and all the storylines got washed away in 4 weeks. Basketball is going to be a lot, and it'll last throughout the year, including RJ's hair. Have you seen his hair?
Yeah, I like it, man. I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
With the way it goes up, he's like 6'6" now.
Well, somebody had to take over the Armando mantle because, Armando's hair was the talking point the last few years, and now it's RJ kind of stepping up in that role. So you like to see that. You like to see that out of somebody.
He's carrying a lot of load. You got to, it's you guys. Well, it was Red Grange never lifted a weight. He used to work at an ice factory, and he would chop ice and carry blocks of ice on his head. And that's kind of what RJ's doing. He's doing his 2020 version of the Red Grange workout.
I always thought it would be hard. I mean, football is one thing. You got it in a helmet. It's more contained. I always thought basketball would be a tough sport to play with, just a lot of hair on your head. Maybe, that's my opinion on it. I don't know.
To me, basketball and baseball, you had to really be comfortable in your uniform. Mm-hmm. Football, you just had to put the armor on and go to work.
Exactly. Yeah, so I do like it from RJ, though. I'm a big fan of that hair. But looking forward to seeing that in person too, because I think it'll probably look better in person if we're being honest with you. So, yeah, man.
When he's going to cut it, what he's going to do, if he's going to have a different hairstyle every couple of weeks like Mondo.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Another storyline the low-hanging fruit we'll have to cover this year. What's RJ coming out? There will be a game where it gets switched up, I believe.
And RJ's shoe game this year is going to be massive.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll have to do. Every year I find a player, I take a picture of their shoes during warm-ups for fun. 2 years ago it was Caleb. And Caleb knew about it, so he'd make sure he'd come over to me and give me a good pose on his shoe. Last year was Harrison Ingram, and Harrison figured it out after a while, but sometimes he changed shoes during warm-ups a couple of times.
I know, man. I know.
So he ended up settling on those turquoise shoes for a while.
Yeah. He was a big fan of
So I'll have to tell RJ next week. I say, okay, my deal with you is I got to do your shoes before every game. So it's all about your shoes each game.
Yeah, no, I think
he'll go along with it.
I think it'll be interesting to see him. And the shoe game at Carolina has always been pretty dang impressive, but there are more players.
The cleat game too, and the uniform game. And by the way, uniforms come out for Saturday's game on Thursday. They've worn the chrome over there before. They did it in 2014. They did it 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I'm not a big chrome guy. I think you should just go with your look. But with the white uniforms that were a different kind of white uniforms, I thought the look was pretty good. I wonder if they pull anything out this weekend. I have a suspicion they're going to go with the regular blue helmet and then white.
It's funny you say that, AJ, because I had actually put a tweet out this morning. I had it scheduled for a few days because I thought of this a couple of days ago. And I've got a sneaky suspicion because we've seen the white throwbacks. I know you're not a big fan of the throwbacks. I like the throwbacks. You're not a huge fan of the throwbacks. The throwbacks.
They've not worn white throwbacks,
but they have them supposedly. I know they sell them at least, so I would assume they have them now. I don't know that for a fact, but I think they should.
The white throwbacks in Wallace Wade remind me of Julius Peppers.
That's the picture I tweeted
out. The touchdown he scored there, and then diving into the end zone.
I tweeted out a picture of Julius Peppers. It was playing Texas. It wasn't the Duke game, but the retro blue helmet, which they've worn, with the white throwback with the white throwback pants. I got a sneaky suspicion we might see those get whipped out. I could be wrong about that. Maybe the JMU game changes that.
Or
they don't do nothing crazy.
What are the all whites called? What do people call the all whites?
The stormtroopers. Yeah, bad luck in the stormtroopers. They don't ever play very well.
Yeah, and you gotta wear Carolina blue at Duke.
Agreed.
Don't you?
You have to.
I mean, with the state one time, wore a white helmet, white jersey, and navy blue pants. Like, tell them you're Carolina. Don't wear that stuff.
That's my suspicion, is that maybe we see the white retros that I've seen. Again, you can purchase them now. I've seen a ton of fans wearing them. That shows me maybe those are back there in that equipment room.
Maybe they have the Ronald Curry jersey, the number one, right?
Yeah. That's what I want to see, because I do like to look
in
at
the Peach Bowl against Auburn in 2001.
I want to see him, and I think maybe we will. Good opportunity to whip him out.
Now that's a hunch right there. You've gone with the hunch twice now.
Conspiracy. I got some conspiracies.
I'm going to go with the modern uniform, blue, white.
Yeah. Okay. And I like that. I'm the same combo, just with the retros.
And we'll do this.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
You have to agree with either Jacob or me. You can't give us a different combination. Send us a DM, reach out to us, let us know in some way who you agree with. You can't say, nah, guys, they're going to go blue, or white, blue, or whatever it is, which they've worn before there. You can't do that. You've got to either side with Jacob or side with me on this one. Not what you want, but what you think will happen. And somebody who's right, if somebody's right, we'll just pull a name out of a hat and we'll give a 1-year sub to.
Oh, I love it. And when Carolina comes out with a white helmet, white jersey, and blue pants on Saturday, and we both look stupid, then it is.
Not gonna look stupid. They wore that during the COVID year.
Yeah, I know.
We have a really cool picture of Cayman Rucker in the 25 jersey that year. And I used for a while because it was the only photo of Cayman that we really had. It was a cool photo.
No, it absolutely was. That's my. I'll leave you guys on my hunch right there. That's my hunch for this Saturday. It dawned on me last week. Honestly, like I said, I've had that tweet scheduled for days because I wanted to do it on Wednesday, right before the day before the uni combos come out. So we'll see, man. When I'm absolutely wrong on Saturday, then it'll be fun. But I think they might be cooking those up in the equipment room, AJ. I think they're getting those ready for Saturday as we speak.
The Dan Orner 52-yard field goal uniform.
Yeah, man.
And then they run into the big blow-up helmet into the end zone, pissing off the Duke fans that were there.
Bring them back, man. They need to channel that energy, that throwback energy in this week and see if they can get things back on track. So we'll see, man. We'll see what happens on Saturday. But keep it locked to tarlishit.com. All your coverage of Carolina football, basketball, and recruiting. $8.33 a month. You can sign up. Links in the description below. Or if you don't want to do that, which we'd rather you do that because you get a lot more bang for your buck and you get something for the money that the hard, working money you earn that you're spending on us. You can send us a Venmo, man, at Tar Heel Illustrated. If you just want a quick way of saying thanks for all we do and the content we put out, it all goes back into running the business, paying staff, travel all over the place when AJ's got to go to across the country during basketball season every other week. Yeah, man, we want to hear from you guys. And if you want to, we appreciate the support no matter what. Reach out to us. What uni combo you think Carolina's going to wear? And like the video below if you think Carolina's going to win on Saturday. We want to hear from you guys. Get some optimism going, AJ. It's not all doom and gloom right now. It's game 5, man. Come on, guys.
Hey, insulation can be a wonderful thing in college athletics. It's so emotional.
I need a little belief back from the fan base a little bit. It ain't over till it's over, man. Let's see what happens on Saturday in Durham, and obviously we'll be there for it. Appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell too. See y'all next time. Thanks.